Hello and welcome to Column Cymru. I'm Mrs. Lacey and I'm going to be going through GCSE Business Studies. The one that I'll be covering is topic 1 of business activity. This is quite suitable for Year 10 students as this is going to be the topic that you will start the business course on. I'm just going to run through the main points of this topic and sort of talk you through those. In the summary that I'll do for the live session, what I'll do is look at doing some exam questions around business activity to try and give you some context of how this might look in the actual exam. Okay, going to start off with talking about what is an actual business. So, a business is an organisation that can actually produce goods or supplies a service. Now, a good is a physical product that you can actually touch, so like a car, table, bed, computer, phone. A service is an intangible item, something that you can't touch. So, for example, financial services, hairdressing, window cleaning, those sort of things. A business involves people, sometimes one person, or it could also be thousands of people working in a business. And a customer is someone who's actually buying a product or a service. And one of the things you probably need to distinguish between is the difference between customers and consumers. So sometimes a customer is someone who buys the product, and then the consumer is somebody who actually uses the product. Now, a customer can be a consumer as well. So if you're buying something for yourself, you are both the customer and the consumer. If you're buying it for somebody else, for example, your parents might buy your phone for you, that means the parents are the customer because they're buying the product, and you are the consumer because you're the actual one using the product. And one of the things you probably need to distinguish. So looking at resources with the business, so there are a number of resources that businesses use to provide their goods and service. So things like land, labour, capital and enterprise. And what business can produce depends on the quantity and quality and how they are actually managed. So we'll be covering quite a few keywords in this topic, and one of the keywords is talking about outputs. And what an output is that the actual what the business is selling or the service that it's selling to its actual customers, so the actual finished product. So you've got different outputs that you can have. So you've got things like consumer goods, so that's where businesses sell to the actual consumer at the end, and they're actually going to consume that product. You've got producer goods, so they're sold to produce the product to actually be made into something else. So for example, like maybe ingredients in a ready meal, they're the producer goods and they're going to get made into something else. And you've got durable goods, they're goods that you want to last for a long time, so like furniture, cars, things that are just going to last, washing machines. Non-durable goods, so they're things that are bought that they're not going to last a long time. Personal services, so these are services that are for personal use, so like window cleaners, hairdressers. And then you've got commercial services, so these are services that are for a business, so like it might be a business that has a canteen that they offer their employees. So looking at the needs and wants of a customer, it's really important that a business is successful. It needs to actually meet the needs and the wants of the customers effectively. So, for example, a need is a basic human requirement. So like we need to eat and we need to drink in order to stay alive. A want is like a desire for a particular product. So, rather than having water, which is what you need to drink to stay alive, you decide that you want a Coca-Cola or you want a Fanta. And sort of making sure businesses understand what their target market is and understanding the wants and needs of the customers is going to be really important to be successful. There are different business functions in business, and they're all interdependent of each other. So when one thing changes, it affects another part of the business. So the four functions of a business is your marketing, human resources, your finance, and your operations. So it's quite important to know the different functions within a business. One of the other keywords that are going to be quite important for you to understand is business environment. So this kind of refers to any factors outside of the business that can affect it. So things like technological changes, so things like, CAD CAM, any AI, any kind of changes that could affect the potential business, economic changes, changes in the law. So at the minute, the Welsh Government is changing the way in which companies dispose of waste. So it's important that companies know how they can be compliant with that. Environmental expectations, so there's a big drive on single-use plastic and making sure that that is not being used. You've got competitive environment, so between the competitors, local business environments, national business environments, global business environments that obviously could affect individual businesses. Now, don't confuse business environment with environmental issues. They are two different things. It doesn't mean environmental issues when we talk about the business environment. Now, you may hear a term with regards to business being dynamic, so being in a dynamic environment, and that means basically that an environment that is constantly changing. So businesses need to keep adapting. So, for the social changes, technological changes, changes with competitors, political changes, economic changes, businesses need to keep up. And if they don't keep up with those things, that is likely to fail. It's also going to be really important for the exam to understand the different business sectors that there are. So you've got things like the primary sector, so this is made up of organisations that are first stage production, so like farming, oil exploration, fishing, things like that. So um, the sort of raw materials that we might use to make other products. Then you've got the secondary sector. So this is made of organisations that are second stage of production. So this involves your primary resources, so like your raw materials and turning these into actual products. So where you manufacture something. Then you've got the tertiary sector, and that's made up of organisations that provide services. So for example, estate agents, delivery businesses, hairdressers are all in the tertiary sector. Then we have the private sector. So this is a sector that's owned by private individuals. And then we've got the public sector, which is owned by the government. So like the NHS, schools, things like that. So you quite often maybe need to maybe describe the difference between the primary sector and the secondary sector, or the private sector and the public sector. So making sure that you obviously aren't kind of mixing up primary with the private sector, and that you know the difference between them. So a question that quite often comes up in the exam is about being an entrepreneur and what an entrepreneur means and the characteristics of an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur basically is somebody who starts a business and then use their initiative to identify a business opportunity. They are innovative, they're creative, they create new business providing goods or services to customers, and they organise resources to create something a customer actually values and wants to buy. Quite often in the exam you'll be asked, why do people want to become entrepreneurs? And quite often it can be a 4-mark question, maybe some quite quite often in the exam you'll be asked, why do people want to become entrepreneurs? And quite often it can be a 4-mark question, maybe sometimes a 6-mark question, depending on what exam you get. So you know, the things that you should be putting there, but obviously more detail. So the bare bones of it is the fact that, you know, sometimes people want to be their own boss. They want to keep all profit. They maybe need a job at that particular time. They might have an interest or a hobby that they want to turn into a business, so they enjoy their work. Maybe they've got something to prove themselves. They can provide service for others, so it might be like a social enterprise that maybe they've identified something in their community that's needed. It might be that they're not happy in the current job, and maybe they want more flexible working hours potentially to fit in with family life. So it's just a kind of making sure that you are talking about these kind of things about why people want to become an entrepreneur. Now, another question that comes up alongside generally why people want to become an entrepreneur is the actual characteristics of an entrepreneur. So what you kind of need to think there is, you know, what sort of characteristics of a person's personality that would make them good to become an entrepreneur. So like initiative. So there are a number of risks and rewards when we look at businesses. So financial rewards, personal satisfaction, providing goods and services to meet needs, but you've got risks as well when you're creating a business. So it might be that you have lower than expected sales, you've got maybe unexpected costs, unexpected events. If we think about the COVID-19 pandemic, um, it was, you know, unheard of that this kind of came about, and businesses really struggled, and you know, you had to be dynamic as a business in order to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. Behind every successful business, there is a business plan. So what is a business plan? So it's basically what a business wants to achieve over the next few years and how it intends to do it. Now, this has got to be a fluid document. And what I mean by fluid, it kind of changes regularly. So what needs to be in a business plan? And I would say, you know, if you can remember three or four different things, and keep those in your mind. You don't have to remember this entire list, but you know, you're going to have a description of the business. You're going to have maybe a marketing section which will detail analysis of the target market, what your marketing budget might be, how you're going to find to promote it. You've got your business objectives and your aims. You've got, you know, human resource section, so you know what the staffing is going to be, how much you're going to be paying people, maybe your financial position of your business, what your forecasts that to be over the next few years, price and expected sales currently, and how you're going to be competitive. Have you got a USP? What is your USP? What's standing out between you and your competitor? Now, in the exam, you might be asked, you know, why do people create business plans? And these are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. You know, the fact that it's going to help you set up a business successfully. It's going to help you raise finances, show possible investors, maybe bank loan. You know, there's going to be no bank that's going to give you a loan without a business plan. So it's really important. It sets the vision, it sets objectives of how you want your business to go. You provide management tools to help coordinate actions and sort of help decision making. Now, in the exam, you might be asked, you know, why do people? Now, there are problems with you know, starting businesses. So there's uncertainty. It's not easy to look ahead. It's not easy to sort of plan what might happen, because market conditions can change very quickly. But a business plan does help reduce those risks. It doesn't remove them. It could be the lack of experience. You might not have the skills to plan ahead. You know, bigger businesses can use experts to try and do that, because they have access to more resources, such like market research, because market research is very important as well when starting a business. And you know, change it regularly and update it. Don't just keep the document as it is. Now, there So there is ways in which you can reduce the risk of planning going wrong. So making sure that you've got market research in place, that you try to do as much primary market research as you can. Talking to experts, which this is costly though, so it needs to be if money allows that. It could be planned for a variety of possible outcomes, or regularly review and update is also going to be important to stop your business plan and business from failing. So one of the important things as well around businesses is profit and what profit is. So your profit is your revenue, so that's how much you're making take away costs, and that's giving you your profit. Now we often measure profit over a year, so what you would make in a year. Revenue is the value of the sales that you're making. You've got things like fixed costs, and these are things that don't change over time. So like rent, for example, will be fixed for the year. You've got variable costs which change with the output. So if you're in a cafe and you sell a lot of sandwiches, then you're going to need more bread in order to make these sandwiches. And then profit is made when the revenue is more than the cost. Some of the things that you're going to need to know is the difference between aims and objectives. So aims is a general statement of what the owner or managers want to achieve. So it might be make more profits. So that's kind of a general statement. Now aims can be turned into specific targets called objectives. So an objective should clearly state what the target is, how much you want to increase it by, when you want to achieve it by, so like within 2 years, who's going to achieve it or who's responsible, and how it's going to be achieved. So some of the So when we talk about objectives, we need to think about the fact that they need to be SMART objectives. So SMART stands for specific, so it needs to be exactly what is being measured, measurable, so that you're able to see a change. It needs to be able to be measured, so like a percentage is always good for that. So it might be to increase profit by 20%. It needs to be agreed, it needs to be involved everybody, that it's achievable. It needs to be realistic, that people actually believe it can be achieved, and time specific, so that you're giving a clear outline of how and when that's going to be achieved by. So kind of typical objectives that might be had with businesses in a business plan are things like survival. So it's important when businesses start out that actually it might not make profit in the first 2 years, because actually survival is the most important, that you're wanting to like break even in those first 1 or 2 years, because setting up a business is quite expensive. It's got a lot of outgoings to start with, so you're not going to maybe expect to see any profit, certainly in the first maybe 1 or 2 years. Once you get past the survival stage, then you might look at actually profit maximization. So making sure that you making profit, and you're likely to try and maybe reduce costs elsewhere to try and maximize profit. You then might go on to customer satisfaction, because that's really important to keep customers happy, because they're going to likely to come back to your business. It might be to increase market share of your business. So measures the sales of one product or business as a percentage of the total market sales overall. So if we think about the mobile phone market, the Apple iPhone is going to dominate that market, maybe then followed by Samsung, then Google, and they will have a particular market share of the market. So let's say, I mean the figures aren't right, but let's say Apple dominate by 55% of the market, Samsung has 30% of the market, Google Pixel has 10%. They're not accurate figures, but you get the idea of how market share works. So other objectives that businesses might have is it might be because they want to be ethical. So what is thought of as right and wrong, paying the workers a reasonable wage, for example. There might be social objectives, so that the business help a local community, local shop set up by local residents. So it might be a community cafe, for example. Environmental and sustainable, making sure that their activities don't damage the environment. So it could be targets to reduce energy, limit carbon footprint, materials from sustainable sources, things like that that businesses might set themselves. So looking at kind of how businesses might actually grow in the work in their business. So when actually starting a business, the main objective is for survival. Now, in the first few years of a business may not actually make any profit, as we kind of discussed before. Now, over time, it's going to expected that the profit is going to come, hopefully, in order for the business to survive. Now, as a business becomes more established, its objectives might actually change. So managers might want the business to get bigger to gain more sales and profit. The growth may include developing more products, expanding overseas, or maybe going into a new target market. Now, changing objectives and aims may be due to a few factors. So one of the factors might be internal factors. So when you once established, the objectives may change. Once a certain amount of profit has been made, managers might want to introduce more social or environmental objectives, maybe become more ethical. Um, External factors could be that there might be a change in the law, which means that you then need to become environmentally friendly, and that's going to change your aims and objectives. Now, a good keyword that you're going to need to know as well are stakeholders. Quite often a question about stakeholders and how they are impacted. So stakeholder is any individual or organisation that's affected or can be affected by the activities of a business or of an organisation. So stakeholders include people like owners, employees, shareholders, suppliers, the community, customers, anything that's kind of involved with the business. Now, a good keyword. Now, business can grow in many ways. So, some of the ways that a business can grow is that it could sell some more of the same goods in the same market. They could sell more of the same goods in a different market. They could extend the products or service range and actually make new products. They could open new outlet factories. They could employ more workers. They could purchase more machinery. They could take over other businesses and could actually merge with businesses. So there are different ways that obviously businesses can grow. So there are different business ownerships that is going to be important for you to kind of know about. So one of the business ownerships is being a sole trader. So this is someone who is owned and managed by one person. So it's a business who, is managed by one person. It does mean you can employ staff though. It doesn't mean that that person is going to be on their own all the time. They can employ people as well. So like it's a popular form of business. The reason why it's popular form of business is because they don't need to fill any legal documentation in order to set up the business. They may able, again, as I said, that you are able to employ staff as a sole trader. Way of business ownership is through being a partnership. So this is where two or more people set up a business to pursue a common purpose. Now, generally, partners are usually allowed to have a maximum of 20 partners. However, there are exceptions, which include solicitors, accountants, auctioneers, and estate agents, that you're able to have more than 20 partners. Now, being within a deep partnership, you need to have a deed of partnership, and this basically is a legal documentation that sets out the rules of the partnership. So things like, how to divide up profits, how decisions are going to be made, how the value of the business if someone wants to leave, or how to decide whether someone else can join the partnership, will be set out in the deed of partnership. So there are advantages and disadvantages to being a sole trader. So one of the advantages is that profit. They can keep all the profit. There's no need to share any of the profit. Now, obviously, they might have to pay employees, but they're not necessarily sharing the profit. You've got decision making that, you don't have to consult others. It's going to be a bit more speedy. You're your own boss. You're free to choose how you want the business to go. You're independent, so you can work at your own pace. You're not kind of dictated to by other people. It's easy to set up as a sole trader, so it's cheaper to set up because there's no legality of solicitors or any legal advice needed. You've got a job. You might be able to you might not be able to actually find a job somewhere that you're going to enjoy. So they're the advantages. Disadvantages, though, is that you have something called unlimited liability. So you are responsible personally for the debts of the business. So if you, for example, are sued because something's gone wrong, you are sued personally. So, that could be your house, your car, at threat. You've got more responsibility. You rely heavily on decision makings, and this could be, quite stressful. It could be something that, takes up a lot of time. You've got limited sources of resources as well, because it's just you. If you had more people, you might have more people to bounce ideas off, or you might have more people to finance your business. So within the partnership, you also have advantages and disadvantages. So advantages are generally a partnership can raise more capital than sole trader, because you've got, as an individual, you might not be able to raise sufficient capital. You've got extra skills, expertise in the business that you're maybe able to split. You've got more people to make decisions, which hope might make things easier, not maybe as stressful. You've got share responsibility, more flexible. You can reduce pressure. It's easy to set up, and involves no legal requirements apart from a deed of partnership. Now, disadvantages, though, the partners might disagree, and this can be time consuming if you're not going to be on the same page. Profits are going to be shared, so you're not going to be able to just keep the profits yourself. They'll have to be shared out between however many partners there are. Some partners might not work as hard as others, which obviously is going to cause some sort of tension within the partnership. And again, owners still have unlimited liability, so it's the partners that are held responsible for the debts of the business, and it's them that are personally responsible. So again, if you're being sued or something goes wrong, it's you personally that's going to get sued, and you could lose, unlimited amounts of money. Now, another business ownership, is what is called companies. Okay, and a company is owned by its investors, who are called shareholders. Now, a company is a business with its own legal identity. So it can owe money, it can be sued, it can sue, and it can own items, it can own property. Owners of ordinary shares have one vote for every share they have. So if you have 51% of shares, you have 51% of the votes, and that would be sort of you as a majority shareholder. Now, a company has its own existence in the law, so this means it actually has limited liability. So the owners of the company are shareholders, and the people who control and make day-to-day decisions for the company are the actual managers. Now, when we talk about having limited liability, now a company two types of company. So one of the first type is private limited company. And these cannot publicly advertise their shares for sale and often are owned by family members. So when we say can't publicly advertise its shares, it doesn't mean you can't publicly advertise your products or advertise your services. It means the shares themselves. So the shares in which you would own the company. Public limited company can advertise its shares and can be listed on the stock exchange. In order to do that, it's called flotation if you are a private limited company that goes to a public limited company and are listed on the stock exchange. But you've got to have a share capital of over £50,000 in order to be listed on the stock exchange. So as we're looking at this, is you private limited companies, and if you ever see the acronym LTD, that means it's a private limited company. So like the advantages of being a private limited company is that you've got limited liability. You're only liable for the money you've invested in the business if it fails. You've got continuity so that the business will not end if one of the shareholders leave. You've got more capital. By selling shares, it may be easier to actually get bank loans as a company. You've got a specialised management. Shareholders, owners, managers can do the work they are skilled at, and divorce ownership and control possible. So the owner may not spend all time managing, inviting shareholders, and able to maintain control. Disadvantages though, there are legal procedures in setting up a company. It takes costs and money. You have to disclose your accounts, so the financial information will be filed and registered and can be looked at by any of the public and competitors, so you've got that risk there. Profits have to be shared with the other shareholders, and slow decision making, especially when shareholders have to be consulted when you're making decisions. Now with a public limited company, which is PLC. So if you see the words PLC, that means it's a public limited company. So you've got, again, limited liability. So you're only liable for what you've invested. You've again got continuity. Again, you've got more capital. Very, very similar to the actual things here. And you're able to invite shareholders and able to maintain control. However, if you're setting up on the stock exchange, that is not going to be possible. So, you've got your costs of setting up. Again, the documents must have 50,000 share capacity to become PLC. You need to share profits. Your affairs aren't kept private. You need to publish your accounts. You may lose control, if you are not the majority shareholder. You've got limited capital available, unable to use the stock market to reduce investors available, and you've got restriction on share ownership. So you've got those things to consider. Some of the other business ownerships that you have got is your cooperatives. So this is a business that's owned and run by its members. So the objective is to benefit its members. So there are different forms. You can have owned by customers, and this is aimed to provide good quality products at reasonable prices. Profits will be invested into the business to help achieve this. And then you've got owned by its employees, so aimed to set out to improve the welfare of staff. Profits will be paid out to employees. Then you've also got owned by maybe local residents. So organisations which each member has one vote and members control the organisation and it is run in their own interests. Some of got charities, which is one of the last sort of business ownerships that we've got, and this is like a non-profit organisation, and it's set up for charitable purposes. So these are set out in law and could include poverty, education, religion, amateur sports, environmental protection, help for the sick, elderly. and any profit is invested into these charitable causes. But it does obviously cost money to run a charity as well. We've got charities, which is so why do businesses want to grow? Well, with more sales in the market, the business may have more market share. With more sales, a business can have more power in the market. Will be more market awareness, and the retailer are likely to stock the products of a well-known brand. It might be to help to reduce competition. That gives more control over the market and may allow to charge more. And having more market share, therefore, means the business has more sales and has more power. Now, how can you actually measure the size of a business? So there's many ways of doing it. So one of the ways is values of sales. So that's the value of the firm's sales, also called your revenue or your turnover. You've also got the value of the business. It can be measured by calculating the value of its assets. So what it owns minus liabilities, and that's what it owes. Can calculate the value of its shares. You can calculate the number of employees, because some organisations don't necessarily sell products. So like the NHS, for example, is impossible to measure with revenue. It's more likely to measure by the number of employees that it has. So the size of an organisation is also where you could actually measure growth and how big it is. It could be that you're comparing taxi companies and you're going to compare maybe the number of taxis, or supermarkets, maybe the number of stores, maybe the charities and how much it raises could be compared. Now, there are several ways in which a business can expand and grow. So you've got franchising, opening new stores, e-commerce, selling online. You could outsource your products to be made by somebody else. You could have external growth, maybe merge or take over companies, and you've also kind of got types of integration as well. One of the types of integration is called horizontal integration, and this occurs when one firm joins with another at the same stage of production process. So this could be, if two mobile phone companies came together. Think about horizontal integration as a straight line, a horizontal line where two businesses at the same point integrate together. Another type of integration is called vertical integration. So this occurs when one firm joins another firm at different stages of the same production process. So we've got two types. We've got backward vertical integration. So think of it as a line, a vertical line. So that backwards vertical is when a firm joins with its suppliers, it goes backwards. So this can help ensure there is better quality supplies tailor-made to the needs of the business and guaranteed its supplies. So they're joining together. So if we think about, let's say KFC decided to buy Pepsi in order to make sure that Pepsi was supplying their restaurants, for example. Forward vertical integration when firm joins with its distributors. So if we look at like this example here where Pepsi has actually bought KFC, so it could sell its drinks there. So that's forward vertical integration. And backwards would be if KFC bought Pepsi. And the last type of integration that could be is that where occurs when firms join another firm in a different type of production process. So if we think about Walt Disney, conglomerate company active in movies, music, television, production, live theatre, productions, toys, clothing, amongst their many operations. Disney theme parks such as Disney World in Orlando, entertainment, millions of visitors across the globe. So, if you're looking for an example, for a really good example for conglomerate integration, Walt Disney is an excellent example here of that type of integration. Now, some businesses choose to remain small, and reasons behind this is it could be that the size of the market might actually be relatively small. So, flags or teddy bears, this means there's limited to how big the business can actually grow. It might be availability of capital, that they need to raise finance and they can't do it because banks maybe find it too risky. It might be the actual motives of the entrepreneur, the owners. They don't want the business to grow because they want to keep control over everything. Because as soon as the business grows, they are maybe going to have to let go of control because they can only do and manage so much. Now, what is diversification? So this is when a business grows by selling products in new markets and developing new products. And this can be risky because the business will be unfamiliar with the products in the market. So if we think about Dyson, they started off with Hoovers, sorry, vacuum cleaners, not Hoovers, because that is a make of a vacuum cleaner. But they started off with bagless vacuum cleaners with very good suction, and they developed lots and lots of products of different variations around that theme. But now they've gone from that and gone into a different target market of hairstyling with hair dryers and the hair wrap, and they've gone down that route as well. And again, quite different from actually having a vacuum cleaner to actually having a hair product. Thing to think about as well is location and how important that is when you're thinking about setting up your business. So some of the things that you need to consider is like the cost, so the amount paid in rent, but where you're going to buy varies according to location, so it'll be more expensive in London than it is maybe in in Birmingham, in um, Manchester and Liverpool. So depending where you're going to set up is important. Sales location may affect whether or not a business gets customers. So it depends what your business and what it's going to be doing. It depends whether or not you want to have it in a city centre or whether you want to have it in a more rural area, because it will depend whether you want to have footfall, whether you actually want people to come to the store, or you actually purely going to be doing it from online. You've also got the image of the product. So some products, it actually is really important where you actually have the distribution or the making of it. So if you think about, things like perfume, if you said, perfume of Southampton isn't going to be as attractive as, perfume maybe in Paris. And again, wine that's made in Bradford, rather than maybe wine that's made in the south of France. That's going to potentially affect your business. Thing to think about as well is location. So things that influence a business location is that you've got the types of businesses, so this has an impact on where it should be located. The proximity to the market, so a business will want to know where its customers are so they can reach them easily. Where the competitors are, because in some cases businesses don't want to be near or too close to rivals. You've got the availability of raw materials, so if you're relying on raw materials, is that able to get to you easily? Thinking about the cost of labour, if you're needing highly skilled workers, are you going to have those within the area that you're choosing? And then infrastructure, so this means like your broadband, your transport, your communication, your support services, is that all there in order for you to use it? So if, for example, you're purely an online business, you are going to need a broadband. There is no point setting up a business, in the middle of Wales, whereby you have hardly got any signal, so you're going to need to think maybe that you need to set up near a bigger town or a city in order to make sure that you're going to have those communication lines.